Inuyasha is one of the most iconic anime series to exist, with it not only being many people's first anime, but also still being their #1 anime to this day. One of these people hounded me for months asking me to watch the show, but I was hesitant at first because it really didn't interest me. The most I knew about the series was that people said it was about a love triangle, and as much as I do enjoy a nice romance from time to time, I didn't think a will they won't they for 169 episodes sounded enjoyable. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious, so I decided to sit down and finally watch the show. And I can confidently now say that this show is more than just a love triangle. Underneath the romance, the jokes, the adventure, the thing that really stuck out to me as I watched Inuyasha was that every major character in this series is going through some form of grief and loss. And a lot of that grief and that pain can be traced back to just one person. But I'll get back to him later, because to understand the person they are fighting and what he represents, we first have to understand what they're actually going through. And there's no better place to start than probably anime's most iconic situationship, Kikyo and Inuyasha, who are currently fighting each other simply due to the fact that they've been tricked and manipulated by the series' main villain into thinking that they betrayed one another by exploiting Inuyasha's childhood trauma, because Inuyasha is half yokai, half human, and he is hated by yokais because he's half human, and he's feared and hated by most humans because he's half yokai. So he's never really found a true connection until he met Kikyo. The two of them fall in love, and Kikyo goes, "Hey, this Shinkan jewel that I've been protecting my entire life will allow me to wish you to become fully human. Do you want that?" And Inuyasha's like, "Sure, yeah, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. That sounds like an amazing idea." But the main villain of the series also wants the Shinkan jewel, and he decides that he is going to manipulate both of them into thinking that they have betrayed one another. He goes to Kikyo disguised as Inuyasha, mortally wounds her, and steals the Shinkan jewel. Goes to Inuyasha disguised as Kikyo, tells him that he always smelled like wet dog and that she never really loved him, and tells him that she was never going to use the Shinkan jewel to turn him fully human. This causes Inuyasha to become quite upset, as again he feels like he has been betrayed, and so he decides that he is going to go and steal the Shinkan jewel for himself and make himself fully demon. Now, Kikyo, thinking that Inuyasha has stolen the Shinkan jewel, shoots him with an arrow and seals him to a tree, and before she dies tells her sister to burn the Shinkan jewel with her, so that way it will never fall into the wrong hands. Anyways, it ends up falling into the wrong hands 50 years later. But first we have to meet Kikyo's reincarnation, Kagome, who 500 years into the future falls into a well and is transported back in time 50 years from when Inuyasha was sealed to the tree. I understand it's confusing, stick with me here. He's dragged into the well by a giant centipede yokai who wants the jewel to become more powerful. And honestly, I think we should hear the centipede yokai. Kill with fire. Never mind. So she releases Inuyasha. Inuyasha kills the centipede yokai, immediately tries to steal the Shinkan jewel because, to him it's only been a couple of minutes and, he still feels betrayed and wants to become a full yokai. This leads to Kikyo's younger, now really old sister putting the beads of subjugation onto his neck, which then leads to the very iconic...
That's right, you are angry after all! I told him not to provoke her unnecessarily.
So now that Inuyasha has calmed down a bit and has realized that 50 years have passed and Kikyo has died, he feels very confused and very conflicted because the first person that he's ever loved and has truly loved him back is now gone, but her reincarnation is staring him in the face. Plus, he also thinks that she still betrayed him, so he treats Kagome very poorly at first, only sticking around waiting for an opportunity to steal the Shinkan jewel, which becomes, near impossible after a totally freak accident that was unavoidable. He and Kagome are kind of now forced to work together to find all of the shards of the Shinkan jewel, with Inuyasha having to rely on her simply due to the fact that she can sense where the shards are, and Kagome having to rely on Inuyasha because, he's going to be doing the fighting aspect of getting the shard back. Really quick, YouTube keeps bullying me with this statistic that many of you guys aren't actually subscribed, so if you're enjoying this video so far, consider subscribing for more stuff like this. So anyways, that's the main point of this entire entire series. So over the course of the series, as they work together, they start to bond, as they actually get to know each other, and Inuyasha starts to see her more than just the reincarnation of his former lover. Even though he tries to deny these feelings and acts like he doesn't really need anybody, but this is all revealed to be an act on the new moon when he loses his yokai powers and then is poisoned because he doesn't have his powers, which causes him to reveal his true feelings now that he's kind of poison drunk. But just as these two are starting to have a real bond, Kikyo is revived. The problem is it's not really Kikyo, because Kikyo has already been reincarnated as Kagome, so it's sort of Kikyo with a bit of her soul back, but not the entirety of her soul, to the point where she has to kind of steal souls from deceased women. And if you're like me, even though you haven't watched Inuyasha or read the manga, you know about this love triangle because it's probably the most talked about thing amongst the fans of this series, especially the fact that Inuyasha is a slimy scumbag because he wants both of these women. And after watching, I don't think that's exactly what's happening. I don't think he wants both of them. The creator of the series, Rumiko Takahashi, probably realized very early on that she wanted to create a story about two characters falling in love, with the main reason them not getting together immediately being that one of them is still grieving their first love. But she also probably realized very early on that that's kind of hard to do when you do establish that the new love interest is just the reincarnation of the first love. And Inuyasha recognizes that, so he already has some sort of affection towards her because of that, and then he starts to bond with her and fall in love with her, and starts to move on from his grief of Kikyo. So what do? You bring back Kikyo as the personification of unresolved grief. Yeah, she's all vengeful at first because Inuyasha betrayed him, blah, blah, blah. But then once she realizes that they were tricked, she doesn't care about it anymore because she's dead. She died, and she's upset about that fact. She had a whole life ahead of her with the person that she loved, and now she's not gonna get that. And now she sees him moving on to basically this reincarnation of her, thinking that Inuyasha is going to forget about her. The whole point of her being back isn't for a love triangle. The whole point of her being back is to be this personification of Inuyasha holding on to that memory and not wanting to move on. Kagome feeling second is supposed to represent that she does love Inuyasha. She understands that maybe Inuyasha was starting to love her, but he's holding on to this memory of his first love, and she's comparing herself to her, especially because she's the reincarnation of her. And at this point, everybody, including Inuyasha, has been comparing her to her. And now again, she's seeing this physical manifestation of her and being like, yeah, man, she's really cool. With the whole point of this storyline being that Inuyasha needs to learn to let go and move on and not let his grief and trauma stop him from forming new connections, and for Kagome to realize it's okay for Inuyasha to always carry a piece of Kikyo in his heart, because that doesn't mean he loves her any less. I don't think it was ever a question of who Inuyasha was going to choose. It was more that Kikyo represented what he lost, Kagome represents what he still has, and the story isn't about choosing between them, it's about learning when it's okay to move forward. The more I watched the show, I realized that was really the underlying theme of the entire series. As we're introduced to more and more characters, we just learn that pretty much everybody in this show is just traumatized and is grieving some kind of loss. But how they heal and move on is very similar. Like Inuyasha's brother, Sesshomaru, who is a little bit upset with Inuyasha because of his daddy issues. Or rather, due to the fact that their dad died, and he sees a lot of his dad in Inuyasha. Inuyasha's dad wanted to make connections with human beings, something that Sesshomaru kind of saw as a weakness. And when their dad ended up dying protecting Inuyasha's human mother, it kind of solidified the thought process that having connections with humans is a weakness. And he already thinks Inuyasha is kind of weak due to the fact that he's half human, so him having weird normie shit like friends is super cringe in Sesshomaru's mind. I didn't really like him at first, if I'm being honest, but when I started to understand that he's just grieving his dad, I started to understand why he was acting this way. He basically just thinks that Inuyasha was his dad's favorite, and he felt like his dad saw him as this weirdo that was weak because he couldn't form connections. And what really makes him feel this way is that Inuyasha got their dad's Tessega, which is his very powerful weapon that can kill 100 demons. So someone was like, that should be mine. That's the cool sword. why do I get the Tenseiga that does nothing other than revive the dead? That kind of sucks, man. I want the cool sword that can kill 100 demons. That's what I want. But over the course of the story, he starts to understand why his dad gave him that sword. It was so that way it would be easier for him to form connections. And due to the sword, he does start to form a connection. He meets a human girl named Rin. She passes away. He uses the sword to revive her, and she sticks around and starts following him around as he stalks Inuyasha and the rest of the gang throughout the series. And over the course of the series, he does start to appreciate her more and more. And when she does shockingly die again, I think that's when it finally clicks in his mind. He's like, oh, I get it now. Oh, I finally understand what he was trying to tell me. And so when she is revived again, like, he's very like, I appreciate you as a person, and I am glad that I made this bond with you. And in a way, he also finds peace with his dad as he finally understands that he was just trying to teach him a lesson. He didn't hate him. Still kind of an asshole by the end of the series though, but I mean, he's a demon. We gotta take the character development where we can. And then we have Miroku and Sango, the demon slayer and the monk, the two people that join Inuyasha and Kagome on their quest to find the Shinkan Jewel shards. Sango lost her family and village due to the main villain. Miroku lost his dad to the curse that plagues his family, the wind tunnel, a black hole that is on their hands that expands slowly until it finally just consumes them. Again, thanks to the main villain. Sango is scared to make connections while Miroku wants to make a connection with somebody as quickly as possible so that way he can have a family before the wind tunnel consumes him. So when these two meet and start to bond and fall in love, it's very complicated because Sango, after losing her family and village, is very scared to make any form of connection again out of fear of losing it. And Miroku understands this, and he doesn't want to put her through any more grief if the wind tunnel ends up consuming him, especially because he understands what that kind of grief feels like because he lost his dad to the wind tunnel. But they say screw it because they would rather hope that their love survives than be scared by their trauma and grief and prevent them from even trying. I'm not gonna lie, I was way more invested in their relationship than I was in Inuyasha and Kagome's relationship. It was something really different. Like, in a lot of anime at this point, I think what it is I'm used to the will they, won't they, and let's be honest, they will 90% of the time. And so seeing this dynamic of two people where one has pretty much lost everything and one is trying to gain everything, but knows that he might die and put her through that again, like, it was just a very interesting dynamic to watch. And then seeing how that kind of affected their decisions and how they treated each other from that point on was very interesting. Like, Sango was willing to sacrifice Rin, and I liked Rin, but at the same time I could understand what was going on in Sango's mind and understand why she made the decision that she did. It was just very compelling and interesting to watch. Not to say that I didn't like any of the characters. I liked all of the characters and a lot of their dynamics. There was just one character though that I really hated, and that's kind of the point of this character. The one I mentioned earlier, the one pulling all the strings, the one that caused all of this for a very ridiculous reason. And that person would be Naraku, the big bad guy of the entire series. This fool was once a human named Onigumo, and he had the bright idea to trick some bandits into stealing the Shinkan Jewel from Kikyo. As you can imagine, this doesn't go well, and the bandit leader, realizing that he was tricked by Onigumo, burns him to a crisp, realizes that he somehow survived that and went, okay, you won't survive this, and throws him off a cliff. So anyways, he survived that and is found by Kikyo, who starts to nurse him back to health, and as she is doing that, he starts to fall in love with her, like really creepily starts to fall in love with her, and so he decides to do the most rational thing that he can really think of at this point, since he's a burnt crippled, and that is to make a deal with a spider yokai so that way he can have Kikyo and the Shinkan Jewel. And so he merges with this spider yokai and a bunch of yokai and becomes Naraku. Now, his genius plan to get both Kikyo and the Shinkan Jewel was to pit them against each other, get Inuyasha out of the picture, and then bank on and hope that when he mortally wounded Kikyo that she would then use the Shinkan Jewel to make the selfish wish to heal herself. But when she decides to die by her wounds and then have the Shinkan Jewel just cremated with her, it literally, no pun intended here, makes his plans just go up in flames. And to nobody's surprise, the yokai inside of this body decide to betray Onigumo and lock away his subconscious completely. But despite that, Naraku's entire existence was born from loving Kikyo and the desire to have the Shinkan Jewel. And now that both of the reasons for his existence are gone, he starts to crash out just a little bit. Because even though he suppressed Onigumo, his human side, deep down, he is very upset that he lost Kikyo, the one person that he loved. How dare she reject me by dying? The one person that truly loved her. I am now going to make this everybody else's problem. Yes, the entire reason that this Sengoku incel has done all of this, has hurt all of these people, is because he is jealous. Because the one person that he basically made his entire existence around died, which was also his fault, by the way, just saying. But now he's basically just jealous and angry at anybody for having loved ones and wants to make them suffer for it. But as a half yokai, he realizes that these are human emotions, that these make him weak. So he wants to get the Shinkan Jewel now to make himself fully yokai. Because rather than confront his pain, he'd rather just erase it entirely. I do think this makes him interesting simply because it's reflected in his actions. Almost to shield himself from being hurt again by making another connection of any kind, he kind of lurks in the shadows and deals with people through puppets. And later in the series, when he gains a lot of the Shinkan Jewel shards, he's able to make incarnations of himself and basically sends them to do his dirty work. I think the most interesting thing about him, though, is that he hates himself, but it's done in the most subtle way. It's really shown through his incarnations, which are basically just his desires. One of them wants to be free and have free will, which I interpreted as him basically not wanting to care about the Shinkan Jewel or Kikyo, but he's kind of forced to because that's his entire existence. It's why he was made. The more on the nose one is that there is just one that doesn't feel anything. It's just a husk, but then ironically enough, it does feel things, which is great foreshadowing, by the way. But what's so funny about this is that these incarnations end up hating him and betraying him at some point, which kind of shows that, yeah, you're the problem. He knows that he's still doing all of this because he's still obsessing over Kikyo. He knows going after the Shinkan Jewel is a part of that obsession, but he would rather run away from this problem and bury it deep inside instead of confronting it and learning from it, truly making him the embodiment of grief and hate. Takahashi did a very good job at that because then when the characters are fighting him, they're also fighting their grief and their anger and their pain, but she also did a good job at showing that any of the characters in Inuyasha could have became him. Spiteful, angry people that would have hurt others because they were also in pain. But by choosing love and hope and making connections, they became better people. They became more than their trauma and their grief. Honestly, I'm glad that I gave this series a chance because I realize now that Inuyasha isn't just a story about a love triangle. It's a story about trauma and grief and not letting it define who you are and choosing to heal and move on. And I think that's what makes this story worth remembering. But what do you guys think? Do you guys love Inuyasha? Do you agree with any of the crazy things I've just said? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you enjoy this video, hit the like button. It really does help me out. And check out my other videos where I talk about Isekai and other fantasy anime. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye bye.